Hello, my name is Heath Jones, and I'm the pastor at Northwood Christian Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. And if you're interested in learning more about us, please visit our website at www.indyncc.org. That's www.indyncc.org. But in the meantime, it's Easter. Or at least by the time you're watching this, it will be Easter. And we hope to see you on Easter morning at our church in person. But if not, I hope that this message finds you well and is exactly what you are needing, because we are all in need of hope for renewal and new life. In fact, in this message of Easter, what we're about to talk about is everything. It is what our faith offers the world at its very root, at its very core. And so this is very important. And you know that every Easter we read an account of Jesus' resurrection. And this year we'll be looking at Luke's version as found in the Gospel of Luke chapter 24, verses 1 through 12. And here it goes, and try to hear it for the first time, as if you don't know what's about to happen. I know you probably know the punchline, but let's hear it again with fresh ears. It goes, "But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, 'Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the 3rd day rise again?' Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened." My preparations for this sermon took several unexpected twists and turns. I entered into the process feeling a bit of pressure, for this is, after all, my Easter sermon. You know, the big one. This is the sermon where I'm supposed to flush out the most important claims Christianity has to make about our lives, about our world, and about our future. And so just in case I get off track later, I feel I'd better summarize what those claims are from the onset. So if you tune out in the middle of this or you need to do something else, you at least have gotten the gist. Basically, the story we just read is supposed to teach us that even when the worst has happened, when the bad news arrives, when our loved one breathes out their last, after violence cuts life short, even after it all burns down to the ground, it isn't over. In the case of these women who went to the tomb of Jesus, they believed they were visiting the very end of life. They had hoped that Jesus would bring about a revolution, a transformation in their community, one that turned the values of the exploitative Roman Empire on its head. All of their hope was placed in this man, and then he died. And then he lost. It was over. Imagine finding yourself standing there, looking upon his dead body. Then imagine someone has the audacity to say to you, perhaps as an aside, "This isn't over." This isn't over. You repeat back to yourself, "Of course it's over. See, Jesus is dead, and with him dies our hopes and dreams. All of the possible futures we had seen for ourselves, futures chock full of love, life, peace, children, feasts, laughter, all of it buried with the body of Jesus. How dare someone suggest that it isn't over? To hope for so much from the vantage point of the valley of death's shadow, that's too much hope. Pessimism, cynicism about the future, well, these can serve as protective shields. We dare not hope for too much because false hope or hope that sells us short, well, false hope, in my opinion, just makes it worse. But the story we just read is about life breaking in over and against it all. Death, destruction, injustice, oppression, all that makes a life of suffering. Jesus the Christ was not destroyed by these things, was not even destroyed by the worst, by the end, by death. The women went to prepare the tomb, perhaps to help them come to terms with the end and then maybe move on, bury hope in some fashion. So I had originally written down as a working title for this little talk, "This Isn't Over," meaning that what those women discovered was that even after the worst has happened, there are possibilities for life. But I couldn't get this other phrase out of my head, this other phrase that was competing with my working title, "This Isn't Over." And the phrase is, "Life finds a way." And that saying, "life finds a way," kept floating in and out of my thoughts, and I did my best to set it aside because I knew where I had picked it up, and many of you may already have made the connection. The phrase is used in Steven Spielberg's film Jurassic Park. And keep in mind, I've spent the better part of the week trying to think of the perfect story or illustration to help relate the passion narrative, that story of Jesus' death and resurrection. Best way to relate that to our own lives, the perfect story, the perfect illustration. What story of hope and redemption might make it plain and bring it home? Jurassic Park? Not by a long shot. That won't do. I refuse. It's too cheesy, too corny, not good enough. But I couldn't get the phrase out of my head. It kept coming back to me, so I spent more time thinking about the movie Jurassic Park than I had intended. And in case you haven't seen it, in that movie, some scientists are able to work some DNA magic to resurrect dinosaurs. And the dinosaurs are resurrected on an island, and the idea is that the island will be turned into a theme park for the public to enjoy. This seems like a good idea to investors, but it is thought to be a bad idea in the mind of the paleontologists and others who have been brought aboard to consult. And why? Why is this a bad idea? Because, well, obviously, it's dangerous. Well, in the movie, it's dangerous because these dinosaurs are portrayed as destructive, deadly forces that cannot coexist with humanity, at least not the meat eaters. And it's in this context where Jeff Goldblum's character, Dr. Ian Malcolm in the movie, says, "Life finds a way." And what he means is that the dinosaurs that have been brought back to life cannot be controlled. You can't tame them. You can't profit by them. No matter what you do to control the chaos and the destruction that they bring, life finds a way. Or the life of these dinosaurs that are portrayed as monsters in the movie. So the life that finds a way is a violent force that wreaks havoc on the people caught in its wake. And that's the movie. It's kind of like a PG-13 horror type movie. So no matter what safeguards the keepers of the island put in place, the monstrosities find a way, because life finds a way, of circumventing the safeguards. And what results is chaos and suffering and a quick escape at the last minute. But life finds a way. And I want to say more like death finds a way, or the dealers in death find a way in that movie. And this may resonate for you because it seems that no matter what we do, the forces of evil in the world keep churning out their toxins, finding a way. But I kept on thinking life finds a way. Life finds a way. How if this life that finds a way is not a destructive force like the raptors in Jurassic Park, but a force for good that persists in spite of the forces of evil? How if life does find a way, but the life that finds its way is the very life we desire in our deepest hearts? How if this life that finds a way were an unstoppable force for good, embedded in the bedrock of our existence, always creating and cultivating possibilities for life? How if life finding a way really was at the heart of the Easter story? So at this point, I set my pride aside and decided to follow whatever thread my thoughts along this line would go, dinosaurs and all. And then I thought about other stories in real life, not from movies, about those whose lives have been upended by other forces of death and destruction. Wildfires came to mind. They have been all too common of late and in the news year by year, summer by summer. And I've been moved to tears when I've listened to the stories of those who have lost their homes or those that they love in these fires. But if the principle is true, that life finds a way, then we should bear witness to the new life that comes up from the ashes. And it does come. I've been inspired by those stories of people who pick up the pieces, insisting that the fire will not write the final or defining chapter of their lives. But it goes deeper. Nature itself rebels against the forces of death. Alison Kagel wrote for the Sierra Club the following description about what happens after the fire. She writes, "After fires, the charred remnants of burned trees provide habitats for insects and small wildlife, like the black-backed woodpecker and the threatened spotted owl, which make their homes in dry, hollow bark. In a moist post-fire climate, native plants like manzanita, chamise, and scrub oak will thrive. Sometimes post-wildfire landscapes will explode into thousands of flowers in the striking phenomenon known as a super bloom." So you see, again, life finds a way over and against the forces of destruction. Life in defiance of entropy and destructive forces. What was once viewed as calamity can be thought of by some in retrospect as a refiner's fire. And God can rework, help us to reframe and find meaning even after such disasters. And I'm not trying to minimize the disasters. They are terrible to endure. But I have heard stories of those who have lived through them, who have found a redemptive arc. And what the story of Jesus' resurrection does is it takes this principle that life will find a way through death, and it takes it to the utmost extreme. Because you see, Jesus' death was not like a forest fire. We expect similar disasters to befall us. But no, the stories about Jesus' death are told as a disaster on par with the very worst one could expect. Here is the Savior of the people, the Son of the living God, the Messiah who is to usher us into a new age, a new heavens and a new earth. Here is God in the flesh, the one who embodies God's purposes and interests for the human race. The hope of us all. And that one is dead. Hope dies in the death of Jesus. This hope was the only hope his friends and family had to hang on their hats on. In life, in this case, has not found a way. At least not life that is life-giving. Destructive forces have found a way. For there is no life after the finality of death. But we read on. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen." And as the story unfolds, you see that they were amazed, surprised, afraid, and filled with joy. What a panoply of emotions to feel. But they then discovered in the coming days, weeks, and years that life that is life does find a way, even after the worst has occurred. The story of the resurrection of Jesus on that first Easter is meant to build in us a hope for our own restoration on the other side of whatever we face. Our claim as Christians is that there is a power in God that calls forth new life on the other side of whatever tomb we find ourselves in. That we will discover that what at first seemed a tomb was in fact a womb that gives birth to life, creativity, possibilities, and life on the other side of, yes, our deaths. And there are many forces of death active in our world. On Good Friday, we reflected on these. There's a war in Ukraine. There's violence in our own streets. Some of us have recently received bad news from the doctor and wonder if we'll be long for this world. All of us have buried loved ones, placing them in their own tombs in turn. The question today is, do you believe it? Do you believe that life finds a way? That the God who called all creation into being can call our dry bones back to flesh and vitality? Will the God of peace lead us through the violence to reconciliation with one another across the global community and at home? Does Easter promise that hope? Will the God who heals restore us to health? And in the meantime, will that God be with us through our illnesses? Will the same power that called Jesus from the tomb stitch us back together as well in whatever way we need it? Does life find a way, or is it all over? Let's believe the story. On Easter, we hold on to a hope that there is a power in God that can call life from every dead place. That there is a power in God that calls the universe together and may yet reclaim and reconstitute your body after it's been pulled apart by decay. The women who arrived at the tomb did not expect it, but they testified to it after they saw it. Will we believe them? Will we allow their story to give us hope today? That when our loved ones die, that the truest thing that perhaps we can say of them is, they have now come alive. Or maybe they've always been alive and yet they still live. And it's a mystery in what way they live. When the forces of death threaten to force us under, we can hold on to the hope that God's Spirit is always creating possibilities for new life. Life from the ashes, life after the tears, laughter after the sorrow. In defiance of the worst chapters in our stories, will we find it in us to say to God and to ourselves, life will find a way. Who could possibly believe it? But if it's true, we will live to see the hope come alive around us. If the stories about Jesus are true, then we will ourselves join with the women who were amazed at what they saw. And when we see it for ourselves, we will join with them in their testimonies about their life in God. We will, along with Peter, peer into the empty tombs around us and go home amazed at the possibilities for life God can create in defiance of death. And here's my Easter prayer, and I'll conclude with this. God, you hold power over death. Please hear our prayer. Lead us now to life.